If anyone in this room can even name this composer, I'll personally double their salary. The voice, slick with the easy arrogance of inherited wealth and unearned authority, echoed in the cavernous, glass-walled boardroom. Elias kept his back to it, his movements slow and deliberate as he guided the buffer across the gleaming marble floor. The machine's low hum was a familiar companion, a steady rhythm against the sharp, staccato tension radiating from the conference table. His tools were worn, the handle of the buffer wrapped in electrical tape where the plastic had cracked, the bristles on his dustpan soft and frayed with use. They were the tools of a man who worked, not for glory, but for survival. In the quiet corner near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, his daughter, Lily, sat at a small, makeshift desk he'd fashioned from an overturned crate. Her tongue was poked out in concentration, her crayons moving diligently across a sheet of printer paper he'd fished from the recycling bin. A sudden cancellation at her after-school program had left him with no choice. She was his world, and if his world had to come to work with him, then he would make a quiet corner of it safe for her here, in the heart of the steel and glass empire of Vance Innovations. A woman's voice, sharp as shattering ice, cut through the room. That is an irrelevant and frankly idiotic challenge, Marcus. We are not here to play trivia. We are here because the launch is in 3 weeks and the entire audiovisual integration for the Aura campaign is a catastrophic failure. Elias felt the change in atmospheric pressure. That was her, Annalise Vance, the queen in the glass tower. He'd only ever seen her in motion, a blur of tailored gray suits and determined strides, her presence a silent, powerful current that parted the hallways. Annalise, it's a simple motivational tactic, Marcus Thorne retorted, his tone dismissive, to emphasize the importance of cultural. Silence, she commanded. The word was not loud, but it was absolute. It landed in the room with the force of a physical blow. The sudden, violent quiet was what did it. It was more jarring than the shouting. In her corner, Lily's small hand jerked, a streak of purple crayon skittering across her drawing. Her shoulders hitched. A tiny, choked sob escaped her lips, then another. The vast, silent room amplified the sound, making it seem impossibly fragile and loud at the same time. Every head at the table turned, their gazes, a mix of annoyance and surprise, landing on the little girl trying to stifle her tears. Elias's world narrowed to that sound. The buffer whirred to a stop. The corporate drama, the tension, the city lights outside. It all vanished. He was on his knees beside her in an instant, his large, worn hands hovering just above her trembling shoulders. He didn't shush her. He didn't ask what was wrong. He simply met her tear-filled eyes, his own expression a sea of unwavering calm. He took a slow, deep breath, a visible rise and fall of his chest, and held it. He waited for her to unconsciously mirror him. When her ragged breathing steadied just a fraction, he began to hum. It was not a nursery rhyme. It was a low, resonant melody, impossibly complex and full of a quiet, aching beauty. It was a cascading series of notes that spoke of rainfall and melancholy and the first hint of sunlight after a storm. It was the very piece of classical music that had been the subject of Marcus's arrogant challenge. The melody filled the small space around them, a shield of pure sound that pushed back the sterile silence of the boardroom. Lily's sobs softened into hiccups, her small hand reaching out to grip the worn fabric of his janitorial uniform. He never broke eye contact with her, his entire being focused on this one small, heartbroken person. He was a father. It was the only job title that ever mattered. From her position at the head of the table, Annalise Vance watched. She had been about to reprimand the janitor for the interruption, the words of dismissal already forming on her lips. But they died there. She saw the man kneel, not in deference, but in devotion. She saw the way his large frame seemed to create a sanctuary around the child. And she heard the music. She recognized the Chopin Nocturne instantly. It was the soul of their new product campaign, chosen for its sophisticated, evocative power. To hear it hummed with such gentle, perfect pitch by a man polishing the floors was a dissonance that struck her dumb. But it was more than that. It was the act itself. The instinctive, immediate pivot to care. It was a solution to an emotional problem. An act of grace so profound and so alien to her world of transactional solutions and leveraged outcomes that it felt like witnessing a miracle. A sharp, unfamiliar ache bloomed in her chest. Her hand rose, her manicured fingers pressing against her lips, as if to physically hold back the wave of emotion. Her vision blurred. She was not impressed. She was fundamentally, irrevocably shaken. The humming stopped. The child was calm, leaning her head against her father's shoulder. He gave her a soft smile and a piece of paper to draw on. The crisis was over. The executives at the table began to shift uncomfortably, looking to Annalise for their cue. But she was no longer looking at them. Her gaze was fixed on the man in the gray uniform who was now quietly gathering his things. He had solved a problem she didn't even know could be solved in that way. With gentleness, with music, with love. Her corporate authority, the armor she had spent a lifetime building, felt suddenly thin and brittle. She stood, her chair making a sharp scraping sound on the marble. The executives fell silent. Elias looked up, his calm eyes meeting hers for the first time. They were deep, steady, and held a quiet sadness she felt she recognized. "Wait," Annalise said, her voice strained, unfamiliar even to her own ears. "Don't go. I need to speak with you." Elias was hesitant, his hand resting protectively on Lily's head. He wasn't a man who sought the spotlight. He had spent years perfecting the art of being invisible. The money from the temporary consulting contract was a lifeline he couldn't refuse, but stepping into Annalise Vance's world felt like stepping onto a different planet. The corporate floor was a landscape of muted grays and gleaming chrome, a place where conversations happened in hushed, urgent tones behind panes of glass. It was a world of sharp angles and silent judgment. His world was one of warm, cluttered spaces, the scent of cinnamon from Lily's breakfast, and the soft thud of worn-out library books on a wooden table. Yet here he was. Annalise had created a position for him, oral aesthetics consultant. It sounded important and vaguely ridiculous. His job was to help the floundering marketing team understand the emotional core of the music they were using for the Aura campaign. In reality, he spent most of his days observing. He saw things others didn't. He noticed the almost imperceptible flicker in the recessed lighting above Annalise's desk that was likely the source of the headaches she tried to hide. One evening, using a tool from his old cart, he fixed it. She never mentioned it, but the next day, the small bottle of aspirin on her desk was gone. He saw the way a junior designer's chair squeaked, causing her to flinch every time she moved during a presentation. He oiled it when no one was around. He didn't do these things for recognition. He did them because a world out of tune was a world in distress, and it was his nature to restore harmony. Marcus Thorne made no secret of his contempt. He saw Elias as an absurdity, a janitor playing dress-up. "Don't forget to take out the trash on your way out, maestro," he'd sneer as Elias passed his office. He would exclude Elias from emails, then feign surprise when he was uninformed in meetings. It was petty, a constant stream of microaggressions designed to remind Elias of his place. Elias met it all with the same quiet, unwavering calm he showed his daughter. He was a rock, and Marcus's childish taunts were just water, flowing around him without leaving a mark. This infuriated Marcus even more. Annalise watched it all. She saw the small acts of kindness, the quiet competence. She saw the way other, lower-level employees began to speak to Elias, asking his opinion on things unrelated to music, the office layout, the drab color of the break-room walls. He listened. He offered simple, thoughtful suggestions. He was bringing a gentle, human order to her sterile kingdom. She found herself making excuses to walk past the small office they'd given him, just to catch a glimpse of him working. His brow furrowed in concentration as he listened to a piece of music on worn headphones. He was an anomaly, a puzzle she couldn't solve. He possessed a stillness she had never known. Her life was a frantic, relentless climb. His seemed to be a quiet, deep-rooted existence. The intrigue she felt was terrifying. It was a crack in the fortress of her self-control. One evening, A storm broke over the city. Rain lashed against the panoramic windows of the Vance Innovations Tower, the sky a bruised purple. Most of the employees had long since gone home, leaving behind a ghost ship of glowing monitors and empty desks. Annalise was trapped in her office, poring over quarterly reports, the numbers of familiar, cold comfort. A distant sound, almost imperceptible at first, drifted through the silent halls. It was music, not from a speaker but live, rich, resonant, and achingly real. She rose from her desk, her bare feet silent on the cold marble floor, and followed the sound. It led her to the grand atrium, a vast, three-story space designed to impress, to intimidate. In its center sat a glossy black grand piano, a magnificent instrument that served more as a sculpture than an instrument. No one ever played it, until now. There, seated at the piano, was Elias. His jacket was off, his sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms. His eyes were closed, his body swaying slightly with the music. He thought he was alone, a man communing with his soul. The music that poured from his fingertips was the same Chopin nocturne, but this was no gentle lullaby. This was the full, untamed piece, a torrent of passion, a deep well of grief, a defiant spark of hope. It was the sound of a heart breaking and healing, all in the same breath. It was magnificent. It was the most honest thing she had ever witnessed in this building. Annalise stood in the shadows of a large pillar, hidden from his view. She watched this man, the janitor, the father, the quiet consultant, transform into a titan. The raw, unfiltered emotion of the music washed over her, stripping away her defenses layer by layer. The sterile numbers on her screen, the market shares, the stock prices, it all felt like a meaningless game compared to this. This was real. This was truth. A single tear traced a path down her cheek, hot against her cold skin. She was witnessing his suppressed soul, the genius he kept hidden beneath a janitor's uniform, and she knew, with a certainty that shook her to her core, that he was more of a king than any CEO she had ever met. The music swelled to a final, heartbreaking chord that hung in the air, vibrating in the glass and steel around them. Then silence, a profound, heavy silence, broken only by the drumming of the rain. And for the first time she felt seen. Childcare proved to be a recurring, unpredictable challenge, and a few days later, Elias had to bring Lily to the office once more. He set her up in his small consultant's office this time, with a fresh box of crayons and a stack of paper. Annalise, seeing the little girl through the glass wall, felt a strange pull. The memory of Elias at the piano was still a vivid, raw presence in her mind. She walked to his office, her steps hesitant. "Hello, Lily," she said, her voice softer than usual. Lily looked up from her drawing, her eyes wide and perceptive. She didn't seem intimidated by the powerful CEO. She simply saw a person. "Hello," she chirped. Annalise crouched down, an awkward gesture in her perfectly tailored dress. "That's a very beautiful drawing." "It's for my dad," Lily said. "He's the best dad." "Yes," Annalise found herself saying, the word feeling deeply true. "Yes, he is." A comfortable silence fell between them. Annalise, for once, didn't feel the need to fill it with strategies or directives. She just watched the small girl work. Then, Lily stopped coloring and looked directly into Annalise's eyes. "You have sad eyes," Lily said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a simple, profound observation. A truth bomb delivered with the unfiltered honesty of a child. Annalise felt her breath catch in her throat. All her life, people had looked at her and seen power, ambition, ruthlessness. No one had ever seen the sadness she kept locked away, the deep, abiding loneliness of the glass tower. No one until this small child. Lily picked up a fresh sheet of paper. "I'll make one for you too," she said, "to make your eyes happy." She began to draw with a fierce concentration. A few minutes later, she held it up. It was a simple stick figure drawing. A tall man, a small girl holding his hand, and a woman with a bright yellow sun drawn directly over her head. The woman was holding the little girl's other hand. All three of them were smiling. "This is you," Lily said, pointing to the woman with the sun. "So you won't be sad in the dark." Annalise took the drawing, her fingers trembling slightly. The cheap copy paper felt more valuable than any stock certificate she had ever held. It was a simple, profound gift, an offer of inclusion, an act of pure, unconditional acceptance. She looked from the drawing to the little girl, and a feeling she couldn't name, a warm, protective, overwhelming thing, surged through her. This child, this miniature version of the man who played Chopin in the dark, had just breached a lifetime of defenses with a purple crayon. Annalise retreated to her office, the drawing clutched in her hand. She carefully placed it on her stark, empty desk, a single vibrant splash of color in her monochromatic world. It was a bridge, and she knew she had to cross it. The invitation was simple, delivered without pretense. "Lily wants to thank you for the paper," Elias had said. "She wants you to come for dinner. If you're not busy." The last part was added with a hesitant awareness of their different worlds. She was never not busy, but she said yes without a moment's hesitation. Elias's apartment was nothing like her sprawling, sterile penthouse overlooking the park. It was small, cluttered, and alive. Books overflowed from shelves, drawings were taped to the refrigerator, and the air smelled of baking bread and something warm, like cinnamon. It was a home, a real home. Lily chattered happily, showing Annalise her rock collection and a stuffed bear with one button eye. For the first time in years, Annalise felt her shoulders relax. She wasn't a CEO here. She was just a guest. After a simple meal of stew and fresh bread, Lily was put to bed. The apartment grew quiet, the only sounds the ticking of a clock and the distant murmur of the city. They sat in the small living room, soft light from a single lamp casting long shadows. The corporate armor between them had dissolved, leaving only two people in the quiet dark. "Why did you stop playing?" Annalise asked, her voice barely a whisper. The question had been burning in her since the night she heard him in the atrium. Elias stared into his hands for a long moment, the silence stretching. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with memory. "My wife, Sarah. She was the real musician," he began. "A cellist. Her music was... it was like breathing. We met at the conservatory. We were going to conquer the world together." He smiled, a faint, sad smile. "Then we had Lily, and the world got very small and very beautiful. The concerts didn't matter as much as her first steps." He took a deep breath. Sarah was driving home from a rehearsal one night. It was raining. A truck hydroplaned. She was gone, just like that. He looked up, and Annalise could see the raw, unhealed wound in his eyes. After that, the music, it had too much of her in it. The piano became a monument to what I'd lost. And I had this little girl who had lost everything, too. My career, my ambition. None of it mattered more than being here, every day to pack her lunch, to be steady. So I put the music away. I got a job with good hours and a pension. I became a janitor." He let out a shaky breath, a confession of sacrifice. "Sometimes, I'm scared. Scared that this quiet life isn't enough. That I'm not enough for her." Annalise felt her own carefully constructed walls crumble. His vulnerability was a quiet strength, an invitation. She heard herself speaking, the words coming from a place she kept buried deep inside. "My father never came to any of my school plays," she said, the admission tasting strange on her tongue. "But he never missed a quarterly earnings call. He'd pat me on the head and say, 'Good numbers.' Annalise, not, 'I'm proud of you,' not, 'I love you,' just, 'good numbers.'" She looked around the warm, cluttered room, a stark contrast to the hollow perfection of her own home. "I learned early on that love was transactional, that my worth was a number on a balance sheet. So I built an empire of numbers. I thought if I built it high enough, I'd finally feel safe. But it's just a taller cage." She met his gaze, her own eyes shimmering. "I'm so tired. I'm tired of performing." In that quiet living room, surrounded by the ghosts of his past and the fortress of hers, they saw each other, not as CEO and janitor, but as two lonely souls who had learned to survive in different ways. He had chosen love over ambition. She had chosen ambition because she never believed she was worthy of love. He reached across the small space between them, his calloused fingers gently covering her hand. The touch was electric, a current of warmth and understanding that said more than words ever could. It was an exchange of truth, a quiet alignment of two damaged hearts. They were no longer just colleagues. They were becoming something more. The shift in the company was palpable. Elias's presence, now validated by Annalise's clear respect for him, had a subtle, humanizing effect. But not everyone was pleased. Marcus Thorne watched the growing closeness between Annalise and the man he considered the help with a venomous jealousy. He saw Elias not as a person, but as a threat to his own ascent, an obstacle in his path to power. And so he decided to remove him. He dug. He hired a private investigator. He scoured public records, looking for any dirt, any leverage he could use. What he found was cleaner than he'd hoped. But he was a man skilled at twisting truths into weapons. He learned about Elias's past at the conservatory, about his wife's death, about his subsequent withdrawal from the professional world. And he began to weave his narrative. The attack came without warning. It was a Tuesday morning. An article appeared on a popular, notoriously vicious business gossip blog. The headline was salacious. Glass Tower Romance or Corporate Grim Reaper? Vance Innovations CEO Annalise Vance reportedly under the spell of a grieving janitor with a checkered past. The article painted Elias as a manipulative charlatan, a failed musician using his tragic backstory, and his young daughter as bait to ensnare a powerful, lonely CEO. It hinted at financial instability, questioned his fitness as a single parent, and slyly suggested that his sudden rise from janitor to consultant was a sign of Annalise's deteriorating judgment. The most vicious line was buried in the middle. Sources within the company express concern for the well-being of the child, who is frequently seen at the office late into the evening, wondering if a more stable environment should be sought by concerned authorities. It was a direct, primal threat, a poison dart aimed at the very heart of Elias's identity, his fatherhood. The fallout was immediate. The company's stock dipped. The board of directors called an emergency meeting. The office buzzed with whispers and sideways glances. Elias felt the stares like physical blows. The corporate world, which had briefly seemed like a place of new possibilities, now felt like a cage of judgment. His greatest fear, that his world would harm his daughters, was coming true. The article was a public character assassination, and the veiled threat of a CPS investigation terrified him to his core. Annalise saw the article and felt a cold, white-hot rage she hadn't experienced in years. This wasn't a corporate maneuver. This was a desecration. Marcus had crossed a line, turning the sacredness of Elias's love for his daughter into a weapon. The board predictably panicked. They urged her to cut ties, to issue a statement distancing herself and the company from Elias. "Think of the optics, Annalise," the chairman had pleaded. "Protect the brand. Protect your position." They were asking her to make the same choice her father always had. Choose the numbers over the person. Protect her old world of sterile power, or her new one, which consisted of a kind man and his wonderful daughter. For Annalise Vance, it wasn't a choice at all. Annalise didn't hesitate. Her response was swift and brutal. Before the board meeting had even concluded, she had her legal team file a multi-million-dollar defamation lawsuit against the blog, naming unidentified internal sources as co-conspirators. She hired the city's most formidable crisis PR firm, not to manage her image, but to systematically dismantle the lies and champion Elias's character. She moved with the calculated precision of a master strategist. But this time, her fight wasn't for market share. It was for a man's soul. She bypassed Marcus entirely, her cold fury a palpable thing in the office. He tried to offer his feigned sympathies, but she walked past him as if he were a piece of furniture, her silence a more damning indictment than any tirade. Her final move was the most important. She went to Elias's small apartment that evening. He opened the door, and she saw the exhaustion and fear etched onto his face. He looked broken. He was holding Lily's drawing, the one of the three of them under the sun. "Annalise, I should go," he said, his voice heavy with defeat. "I can't have this poison touch her. I'll resign. I'll disappear. We'll be fine." She stepped inside, closing the door behind her, creating a sanctuary from the storm outside. She walked right up to him, took his face in her hands, and made him look at her. Her eyes were blazing with a fierce, protective loyalty. "No," she said, her voice low and absolute. "You will do no such thing. You will not run. You will not hide. And you will not face this alone." She let go of his face and took his hand, her grip firm and unwavering. "This is not your fight anymore, Elias. It's our fight. I'm with you. We will fight this together." He stared at her, seeing not the CEO, but a warrior, a queen defending her own. The fear in his eyes was replaced by a dawning sense of wonder. All his life he had been the protector. He had never had someone stand up and offer to protect him. He intertwined his fingers with hers, a silent, powerful acceptance. In that moment, they were no longer two separate people navigating a fragile connection. They were an alliance, a unified team, and for the first time Elias believed they could weather any storm. Annalise had made her choice. She had chosen her new world, and she would burn the old one to the ground to defend it. The night of the Aura product launch gala was thick with tension. A literal storm raged outside, mirroring the corporate and personal tempest that had been swirling for weeks. The ballroom was filled with journalists, investors, and the company's entire staff. The air crackled with whispers, the scandal surrounding Annalise and Elias, the unspoken main event. Marcus Thorne moved through the crowd like a shark, exuding a smug confidence. He believed he had won. He had cornered Annalise, forcing her to choose between her reputation and her pet project. He was certain she would buckle. The presentation began. Annalise walked onto the stage, a solitary figure in a simple, elegant dark dress. A hush fell over the room. Her face was calm, her posture radiating an unshakable strength. She began to speak, but she ignored the teleprompter. "For the past few months," she started, her voice clear and steady, "we have been working on a product we believe will redefine our connection to technology. We called it Aura, because we wanted it to have a soul." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the room. "But a company, like a product, is nothing without its own soul, without integrity. For too long, we have been a company of numbers, of profit margins and projections. We have celebrated status over substance, and ambition over authenticity." Her eyes found Marcus in the crowd. His smile faltered. "Tonight, we are changing that," Annalise continued. "Tonight, we are redefining what we value." She turned to the side of the stage. "I want to introduce you to the man who is the true soul of this project. The man who taught me that the most profound strength is found not in aggression, but in gentleness. Mr. Elias Cole." A collective gasp went through the room as Elias walked onto the stage. He wasn't wearing a suit, but a simple, clean dark shirt and trousers. He looked not at the crowd, but at Annalise, who gave him a small, reassuring nod. He walked to the grand piano that had been placed center stage. Before Elias could sit, Marcus, seeing his victory slipping away, stepped forward. "Annalise, a word of caution," he said, his voice oozing false concern for all to hear. "Perhaps relying on such questionable recent influences for a launch of this magnitude is unwise. The board may see it as a liability." Annalise looked at him, her expression turning to ice. "Thank you for your concern, Marcus. But my faith is not a liability." She turned back to Elias. "Elias, would you play for us?" Elias sat at the piano. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and placed his hands on the keys. And then he played. The first notes of the Chopin Nocturne fell into the silent room, not as a gentle hum, but as a thundering pronouncement of truth. The music was a living thing, a story of pain, resilience, and profound love. It silenced every whisper, every doubt. The sheer, undeniable genius of his talent was a force that could not be denied. He poured every ounce of his grief for his wife, his love for his daughter, and his newfound hope into the performance. It was not just a recital, It was a vindication. The entire room, the hardened journalists, the cynical investors, the gossiping staff, was held utterly captive. When the final note faded, a full second of stunned silence hung in the air, more powerful than any applause. Then the room erupted. It was a roar of appreciation, of awe, of understanding. Elias stood, his face flushed, looking overwhelmed. Annalise walked over to him. She took the microphone. The Aura campaign was built on the idea that technology should connect us to what is most human, she said, her voice ringing with emotion. Mr. Cole is the most human, most decent man I have ever known. She turned her gaze back to Marcus, her voice dropping to a lethal calm. Which is why it is my final act of our company's old chapter to announce that Marcus Thorne's employment is terminated, effective immediately, for corporate espionage and malicious defamation. A wave of shock rippled through the crowd. Marcus's face went white. Before he could respond, security was quietly escorting him out. Annalise then did the one thing no one expected. In front of the entire world, in front of the flashing cameras and the watchful eyes of her board, she reached out and took Elias's hand. She intertwined her fingers with his, a simple, public gesture of unwavering unity. They stood together, a silent, powerful tableau against the storm. They were a couple, and their new world had just begun. After the whirlwind of the gala, after the congratulations and the shocked whispers had faded, they found themselves alone on a secluded terrace overlooking the rain-slicked city. The storm had broken, leaving the air clean and cool. The city lights glittered like a fallen constellation at their feet. The immediate fallout had been dealt with, the battle won. Now, only a quiet, peaceful catharsis remained. You didn't have to do that, Elias said softly, his voice full of wonder. Risking everything for me. Annalise turned to him, her expression open and vulnerable in the soft light. It wasn't a risk, she replied, her voice just as quiet. It was a choice. For the first time in my life, I chose the person over the numbers. I chose my own integrity. She stepped closer, her hand finding his again, the touch now familiar, necessary. You and Lily, you didn't just come into my life. You showed me what a life could be. He looked down at their joined hands, then back up into her eyes. He saw no trace of the icy CEO, only the warm, courageous woman who had stood with him against the world. All the unspoken feelings that had been building between them for weeks, the shared glances, the quiet understanding, the deep, soulful connection, rose to the surface. Slowly, he raised his other hand to cup her cheek, his thumb gently stroking her skin. Annalise, he whispered, her name a prayer on his lips. She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering shut. In the quiet peace of the rain-washed night, he lowered his head and gently pressed his lips to hers. It wasn't a kiss of fiery passion, but one of profound gratitude and deep, reverent love. It was a promise, a homecoming, a perfect, harmonious chord held in the silent aftermath of a storm. When they finally broke apart, they simply stood together, holding each other, watching the city lights and knowing, with absolute certainty, that they were no longer alone. Their victory was complete, their feelings finally declared, and the future stretched before them, a blank page on which they would write a new song together. A year later, the world was a different place. Sunlight streamed through the large windows of a house filled not with the sterile perfection of glass and steel, but with the warm clutter of a life well lived. In the backyard, a lush garden bloomed with defiant color. This was their home. Annalise, dressed in soft jeans and a simple sweater, sat on the porch steps, a cup of coffee warming her hands. She was watching Elias and Lily at a beautiful upright piano situated in the sun-drenched living room. He was no longer a janitor, nor a consultant. He was a partner in every sense of the word. After the gala, Annalise had fundamentally restructured her company, creating a new corporate culture rooted in the values of integrity and humanity Elias had awakened in her. But his true work and hers was this. Elias's hands, strong and gentle, guided Lily's small fingers over the keys, teaching her a simple scale. Her laughter, bright and clear, was the most beautiful music he had ever made. They were a family, happy, whole, and safe. The drawing Lily had made for Annalise was framed on the wall, a constant reminder of the simple, profound truth that had changed all their lives. Together, they had launched their shared purpose into the world. Using a significant portion of her wealth and all of his soul, they had established the Sarah Melody Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to providing free musical education and instruments to underprivileged children in the city's forgotten neighborhoods. It was a living tribute to the wife he had lost and a testament to the love they had found. It was their way of bringing harmony to a world so often out of tune, of ensuring that other quiet geniuses, hidden by circumstance, would have a chance to play their song. Elias looked up from the piano and his eyes met Annalise's across the room. He didn't need to say a word. His gaze was full of a deep, abiding love that still took her breath away. She smiled, her heart full, and silently mouthed the words, "I love you." He smiled back, a radiant, beautiful smile that reached his soul. He had found his music again, not in the thunderous applause of a concert hall, but in the quiet, steady rhythm of a life built on love. True harmony, he had learned, was not the absence of silence, but the beautiful music one could finally hear within it. Where are you watching from? From a quiet room, a busy cafe, or a moment stolen in your day? We're grateful you're here. If this story of love, integrity, and finding music in the most unexpected places touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us of the good in the world. Leave a comment below telling us about a time an act of quiet kindness changed your day. Thank you for spending your time with us. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and never stop listening for the music.